Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're back with another In Context. Today is December 14th, 2025. We decided, since this last podcast of 2025, we're going to do a year in review to summarize significant events that happened in 2025 we should make note of. In particular, we should discuss what changes happened in the beginning of the year and what happens now to reflect on it. I figured we'd start, of course, with Gaza and Israel's new emerging role in the Middle East.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So at the beginning of this year, Israel was going into ceasefire in its onslaught on Gaza, which it broke in March and went into an even more vicious genocidal campaign from March all the way through to October. Right now, we are back into ceasefire with a view of something else to emerge. The important takeaways I want to look at are not exactly the specifics of the Israeli slaughter, which is continuing daily, but the emerging role Israel is trying to assert in the Middle East and the way its imperial sponsor, the US, is managing that. So Israel is trying to assert that it is the imperial viceroy in the Middle East who has the right to decide what goes on, who lives and who dies, and what regimes to continue and what regimes to collapse. The US is not granting that carte blanche. So it keeps saying that, well, actually, there are limits to what Israel can do. Israel has to apologize to Qatar. Yes, true, the US approved the attack because it could not have happened otherwise. But then the US can always turn around when it fails and disowns it. It says that Israel is not being nice or friendly in Syria and should desist, but doesn't take action on this. So what's happening is Israel is trying to assert something. The US is not very concerned about that because, well, it's killing worthless human beings to them. So it's not very important. What is important is it wants to assert that it has the right to stop Israel when it wants. So essentially, the US government doesn't mind Israel acting as a rabid dog, as long as this rabid dog is known to be on leash. So this is not settled order, actually. This is an unsettled order, and I think it will evolve, and we'll see how it evolves in the next year, because international relations have rhyme, and that rhyme develops through conventions and expectations that keep repeating themselves. This hasn't happened yet. So the imperial order in the Middle East is evolving. It is in a period of fast evolution. For the last maybe 30 years, the order has been settled since the US occupied the Gulf directly in 1991 and became a direct colonial force in the Middle East rather than an indirect force. The order changed. So the order that settled since the late 60s changed in 1991. The order is now changing again. It's about 40 years since change. I said 30 years because it took some time for that to people to realize that and to start acting based on it. But this order is now changing again. How it's going to evolve and where it's going to end is something that needs to be watched. And I expect that in the next year, we'll see how it would settle down. One thing that I think we should watch for is, it seems to me that there is an emerging crack in the Arab Zionist bloc within the Arab nation state order in the Middle East. So just to recap, after the Arab Spring, the colonial Arab nation state order in the Middle East broke into two camps. Openly pro-Zionist bloc that was actively in alliance with Israel against the local population, and a traditionalist bloc that wanted to maintain its status as a mediator between the local population and the imperial colonial order. The point where the Tufan al-Aqsa happened, the traditionalist bloc had dwindled to about 4 or 5 states, with almost everybody else either in the Arab Zionist regime bloc, or moving towards it. Right now, it seems that there is a crack happening. So some of the core members of the Arab Zionist bloc are still in complete alliance with Israel, regardless of the noises they make, like the UAE and I think Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia gives signs on both sides, but I think it's still in that bloc. The other side, which is primarily Egypt and Jordan, are scared of the consequences of their alliance with Israel, that this is going to come home to them. So they are having second thoughts. Now, whether that is going to continue to be the case or will they go back home to mama in Tel Aviv, we'll see. Joseph, back to you.
Yeah, I think right now, Israel has. I think I, for the most part, agree with what you just said. I think Israel has a lot of room to operate. They may still, Trump may still want everyone to think Israel's on the American leash, but it's a pretty long leash. There's a lot of room they can run while on that leash. And I think, today's attacks that just happened in Australia, I think that's going to give Israel more excuse to be able to do sort of things that they might not have been willing to do before. It's interesting, they're already trying to pin this on Iran somehow, even though the two guys were Pakistani and Algerian, I believe. And the Pakistani guy, there's videos of him studying in, with traditional Sunni, Salafi kind of, teachers. So, I'd like to see how they tie that together with Iran. But again, that's going to be the way things are. Going forward, I don't see the United States really doing much to rein Israel in. I think Trump is dealing with these Epstein file leaks that are, just day by day coming out. Death by 1,000 cuts is really what the Democrats' strategy with this is, it seems like. And I think Trump is probably going to eventually launch something in Venezuela. There's just too much evidence at this point. First I thought this might just be a bluff, but I think there will be, attacks on Venezuelan soil coming very soon. And that'll give Trump ways to delay the release of these files. And there's other legal games he can play once he crosses that Rubicon, that threshold, right? So I think, I still believe, though, and I think you probably do as well, that the United States is trying to, as best as possible, extricate itself from the Middle East. I really do believe that. I think, the new security strategy really is focusing on the Western Hemisphere. And interestingly enough, it seemed even a little bit light on East Asia. It really seems like this is what their goal is to rein in the narco trafficking or whatever, and the Monroe Doctrine back alive in 2025. With that being said, I also don't really think that we're going to see much real progress on the ground in Gaza. I think this status quo is what we're going to see for a while. I don't see any meaningful redevelopment or peace or moving forward. It's going to continue to be an awful place to live for these people, and it's a tragedy. And, I just don't see, I think 2026 is going to be a very volatile year. I think the U.S. economy itself is also due for the inevitable recession that everyone knows is going to happen eventually. There's just too many bubbles, AI, housing, you name it. There's all these little signs that are showing up. They're getting brighter and brighter. And, that'll also trigger some interesting foreign policy responses, especially as we get closer to these midterm elections. So if the economy's in the tank and we're in May or June and we're getting close to these elections and it looks like the Republicans are toast, Trump might do something really aggressive. I don't see it past him. And I also think the thing we have to consider as well is, there's just increasing evidence that Trump is really sort of the early stages of senility or dementia, whatever you want to call it, are becoming more and more apparent. And it means that, one, his decision-making will be less rational. And two, it means, similar to Biden, there's going to be other people making those decisions for him or pushing his hand in the direction of the decision that needs to be made. And I think that, who is able to get to him first and influence him and push him which way will really be a major shape in the trajectory of 2026. Will it be the Zionists who are interventionist neocons, or will it be the isolationist wing? Who's going to get his ear first? Because I really think at this point, whoever gets to his ear first will probably be the ones to succeed pushing him in that direction. Because I see him as an empty husk. I don't think he stands for anything at this point. I really don't. I think this immigration thing is all he's really got, the narco-terrorism thing, and other than that, I think he's pretty much flexible on just about everything else. So whoever can get there to him first and convince him one way or the other is going to be who wins that discussion. which is like flipping a coin. You don't know which side you're going to get, heads or tails. So we'll see what happens when the time comes. That's sort of my take.
The empire being the empire policy being heads or tails. It's a tragic comic. So it's
Yeah,
scary.
it's terrifying.
Yeah, I'll just constrain this by the following. It is true that the way Trump dresses things quite frequently has to do with who talked to him last and how he sees that he can position himself best to look great. But there is an order to the madness and there is a strategic direction. Like, for example, look at Gaza. The order to the madness is the US is going to enlist Muslim soldiers to protect Israel and maintain order. So the International Stabilization Force is going to be Muslim soldiers under an American general protecting Israel. This is actually a two-sided business. So on the one side, the US is protecting its Israeli colony. On the other side, it is constraining it. It's not one-sided. And Israel doesn't like that. That's why I'm saying, for example, we don't want Turkish forces. But it's going to happen. It seems that the US wants Turkish forces because they need someone who is able to work with Hamas. And the US is explicitly saying that we are not going to go and take away weapons that Israel could not take away. Now, Trump postures that there is hell to pay, and I'm going to burn it one day, and the next day I'm going to turn it to the Rivera. And that depends on who has last talked to him, whether it was a militarist who want to burn the place, or whether it was a real estate type who wants to create the Rivera in there. But the strategic direction, the overall framework is there. You're dealing with colonialist thieves who want to steal the whole place and don't care about the population one cent. So the strategic direction is obvious. The comic stuff has to do with delivery, and delivery is not tangential. It's quite important because this is politics, and image is as important as substance. So I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying that there is substance inside this nonsense. And although the nonsense can end up undermining the substance, there's substance that's quite evil. That's all I'm saying. Think we should move now. Right, Danny?
Yeah, let's look at Syria.
Okay, fine. So at the beginning of the year, Assad regime had just fallen, and something was emerging. What has emerged is better than I think anybody could have had a right to hope for. So there are the foundations of something that could survive. It is not an Islamic state. It does not claim to be an Islamic state. And people who are practicing the gotcha, it's not Islamic, are really being foolish. It didn't claim to be Islamic. And they need to look at what they are looking at. Syria is a land under 3 colonial powers, not one. It is being colonized at once by 3 colonial forces, Russia, Israel, and the US. At once. This didn't cease. And it didn't happen after the revolution. This developed over the last 14 years. This land is under 3 colonial powers at once. So the fact that it's moving farther away from that colonial order is great and should be celebrated. And people shouldn't go and say, well, the colonial order still continues to exist. This is bad. This is horrible. We have to condemn it. This is very foolish and shallow. Look at what you have. Look at where you're moving. Look at what are the possibilities and appreciate what's happening. Don't, on the other hand, go and justify anything. Okay? So don't go and justify the continuation of colonialism. The fact that the Syrian government has to accept it because it cannot do otherwise does not mean that we should accept it and say, yes, colonialism is a good thing. Colonialism is a bad thing. Colonialism is haram. Colonialism is horrible. Colonialism is against the human race. Even if you know it's inhuman. Okay? Fine. All of that's agreed. However, this is moving away from the colonial. The US looks like it wants to wind down the costs of the empire, not the substance of the empire. So the US is saying we're going to roll back the number of bases in Syria, but we insist on having at least one base. And we insist on having scouts to do our bidding, local bidding. And we insist on having the right to do whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it. in the name of fighting Daesh. That is complete nonsense, actually. Okay. Because this Daesh thing is few guys here and there who are attacking anyone who comes by their way. So yesterday they attacked the American colonial forces because they went where the Syrian government told them not to go. Last week they attacked the Syrian government itself. And in between they were attacking the colonial American scouts of Ujlan, the Kurdish anarchists in east of the Euphrates. So you have just rabid dogs. But this is not a real force. It's just an opportunist thing. The US used that to justify the continued existence of the empire, but it wants to wind down the costs of the empire. So what you're looking at is trying to manage an investment. So it has to be understood in this way. So the US wants to wind that down and doesn't mind the current Syrian government to act as the colonial scout. And the Syrian government is saying, well, fine, if that means that you guys are going to roll back your colonial interference, we are willing to deal. The Turkey is saying you need to roll back that nasty anarchist outfit in Eastern Euphrates. And the Americans keep saying, yes, we're going to do it, but under the table they are not. So the US is pushing back, although officially it's not, because actually it's getting a lot out of Turkey right now. Also, Europe now needs Turkey, and that's a related issue. So nobody right now has an interest in antagonizing the Turkish nation state. The Turkish nation state sees in the anarchist, non-believing, Ujlanist, Kurdish thing a threat to the nation state. So it doesn't want it there. Europe, that used to back it a lot, went quiet, mostly, except for some French interference. The US officially says we're going to roll it back. Under the table, they are funding them. They are protecting them. Yesterday, they were protecting them. US Air Force was in the skies saying we are protecting these guys. So be careful of the double speak of the empire. Joseph, back to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think overall Syria, I agree. The idea that al-Sharaa was going to come in and create a caliphate on day one, and everyone was start living like the Sahaba did 14 centuries ago. It's craziness. Some people thought this was going to happen too. There's people that genuinely thought that this guy was basically going to do what ISIS did, which was make a ruling decree from the minbar, and then all of a sudden everyone the city goes black and there's no electricity anymore. Like that's what people thought was going to happen. Some people dreamed was going to happen, and of course that wasn't going to happen. Syria is not that kind of that was never going to happen in Syria, right? Regardless of what people's fantasies were, right? And I think all things considered, living in the real world, you have to get through these sanctions and all the other economic barriers, and within a year he's managed to get all of them lifted almost, right? The Caesars Act or Caesars sanctions were lifted, or officially going to be lifted, I think, in a week by Trump. Congress just signed off on it. That's a big deal. If this country is going to rebuild itself, it's going to have to rebuild itself through the way all other nation states find success, through developing an economy and functioning infrastructure and having electricity that works 24 hours a day, and stuff that's basic. And they're getting closer to being able to achieve that. I was reading again that Syria recently was able to have 24 hours of full electricity for everybody for the first time in 14 years in some places. So obviously things are going in the right direction on that front. I still think they're going to have to deal with Iranian influence, Iranian efforts to destabilize through Alawite communities, through other Shia minority communities. I think we still see that game hasn't stopped playing yet. They're going to need their intelligence services to find and root out these people, as well as ISIS. So there's internal threats still to the stability of the state, but they need to, they got to address it. They got to address it. And again, if they can quell some of these potential hotspots, then the long-term future, I think, looks pretty good, to be honest. As for the United States, they're going to be there for a while, and it's going to be hard to extract them. But, it seems like Sharaa has done a pretty good job of keeping Trump from doing anything too destructive in Syria, to my understanding. It's almost like what the United States is doing isn't hurting his regime per se. isn't hurting the efforts of the new state. Now, obviously, the best interest for everybody, the United States and Syria, would be for the United States to be out of there as soon as possible. But if that's not going to happen, the next best thing is them collaborating to get rid of ISIS and other threats that sort of loom to the state's to the overall safety and security. I agree the United States will continue to support quietly these rebel groups, these PKK affiliated groups in the Northeast. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. And that will continue to be a problematic issue for this new government. But again, my hope is that things stabilize economically, life starts improving for people, and there's more impetus for these groups to sort of become part of the state rather than trying to undermine it or create their own separatist statelets and autonomous zones. But I think all in all, it was a pretty good first year for this new Syrian government. I have a lot of colleagues, for some reason, a lot of Syrians came to Bosnia, believe it or not, before the war, during the war. Like, Bosnia's been a place where you'll always run into somebody who has some kind of Syrian connection. And a lot of these guys have gone back for the first time in years, and they all tell me the same story. They all say that it's functional, it's safe, they like it, they can see the improvements, and they're really happy. And some of these guys plan on going back. And I think that if you really want to know what's going on in Syria, the best way to find out is talk to the Syrian people who are living there. And from my interaction with these guys, everyone seems very upbeat and positive. Far more so than Americans feel about the United States right now, I can tell you that. Because every time I run into an American here, it's just like you would think that America's Syria, and you think Syria is the United States in terms of the reactions. Because you talk to an American right now, and it's just like you feel like the world has already ended. And you talk to Syrians, and it's a real sense of hope and optimism. So that's sort of my take on that.
I don't think the progress is going to be linear, and I don't think it's going to be trouble-free. But I think that we're ending the year in a better place than where we started it. And there is potential that we'll end the next year in a better place than we started it. And this is a hope and a possible way out for the Ummah, and it deserves support. It doesn't deserve unquestioned support, because unquestioned support is wrong to any human being or collection of human beings. But there is a difference between supporting with your eyes open and the foolish, shallow, gotcha attitude. Anyway, I think we should shift naturally to what's happening in Europe, because it's interestingly related to what's happening in Syria. So the fact is, the international order is closely related to the balance of power in Europe. And quite frequently, Americans in particular underestimate that to their determined. I mean, American administrations. Europe has been the source of the imperial order. It continues to be a big bulk of the Western alliance that oversee the imperial order. The balance in Europe, as a result, represents the engine of the international order, or the centerpiece of it. I think this year has seen something very significant happening. US has moved from being the protector of Europe and the security of Europe, which is the role it has been playing since the end of World War II, to being a mediator between Europe and Russia. This has been emerging since, I think, at least the first Trump administration. Biden tried to cover it up, but that was actually, in my opinion, the underlying strategic logic. The US is afraid that the EU can form a competitor to it, and it's trying to contain it with Russia. This is not a new policy, although the Trump crowd may think that they have hit on something new that nobody has ever thought about. This is what the English spent all the 19th century doing, failed to do during the first half of the 20th century, and as a result lost their place as the head of the imperial order through World Wars I and II. So this is a very old English trick. Make sure that there is always two almost equal powers in Europe duking it out, and make sure that if the balance tips to one side, you tip it to the other side. And both of them will have to ask for your help and alliance, or you would present yourself as the mediator. So it's not as if Trump has discovered that. And this is very old trick. Okay. And the Europeans see it coming and they don't like it. However, they pretend to like it because they don't have other options. And they think that they are extracting from the continuing imperial order outside Europe. They are extracting more than they can get otherwise. So that's why they continue to maintain the fiction of Western unity. But developing schism is showing up. The latest is the closest European ally of the US now, Germany, is openly acknowledging that this is at an end publicly. I have never seen that. So in about 40 years of watching the international order, I have never seen that. Yes, during the Cold War, Germany played the role of mediator or junior mediator between Russia and the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc because it was divided and exactly in the middle. But it was always doing it in concert with the US. But now the Germans themselves are saying we have to do something European. The French has been saying that forever since de Gaulle. It has never happened because the Germans have never wanted to happen. And the English never want Europe to go anywhere. They pretend to. So Europe now is in a place where it would start trying to do something on its own. Europe is a very slow force. And that's why a lot of people dismiss it. And a lot of the arrogant token class in the US, both on the left and right wing, dismiss it as befuddled. But it's not befuddled, it's very slow. But it ends up where it wants to be eventually. You know, you're dealing with tortoise type of political structure. So for a long time, for example, people thought that the US has done a fast one on Europe by getting them to absorb Eastern Europe, but they have managed to put Poland under control. They're managing to put Bulgaria under control and to absorb it truthfully into the alliance. Even the Baltic states that spent the last 10 years cozying up to the US are discovering that this is a dangerous place to be and Europe is a safer place. So people should not dismiss the European Union too soon. These guys have spent 200 years exploiting the world, and they know there is a lot to be had by doing this, and they want to have a role in this imperial order. And the US dismissing them into a subservient state status where they just fight out with Russia, and US comes to settle down between the kids is not something you'd want to be, or a place where they want to be. However, the important piece for our discussion now is because of that, Europe now sees that it needs Turkey. Because the only way Europe can contain Russia without the US as an active protector is by bringing Turkey in from the cold. And that means that Europe has to take care not to antagonize Turkey. So it also means to some degree that the US needs to maintain Turkey in a middle place between it and Europe. And it means that the US does not also want to explicitly antagonize Turkey. And that has direct relevance to the US colonial project in Al Jazeera, east of the Euphrates in Syria, because Turkey sees a threat in there and wants to get rid of it. So they were saying, yes, we're going to do that. And meanwhile, it makes sure that doesn't happen. Joseph, back to you.
Yeah, so I feel like, I'll try to be short here. The EU will survive. It always does. And, you're right. Everything here moves at a tortoise pace. I mean, you can just look at this new ETAIS system, this new entry-exit system. It was supposed to be first reeled out in 2024, and now they're delaying it to 2026. But they actually first started talking about this thing in like 2020. So, but it's going to happen eventually, right? So it'll happen, but just very slowly. I think, the EU doesn't want to be in a position that the United States wants to put it in, and it'll avoid being put in that position. It's still too powerful to be completely subservient in that manner, where the United States can just play it as a foil against Russia when it chooses to and extract whatever benefits we can free of charge. I don't see that happening. But you're right. The point about Turkey is important. Turkey's position is very strong right now in this regard. The EU needs it. The United States needs it. So they're both sort of competing for its blessings in some regard. I think Turkey is going to probably continue to try to play both sides of the fence. which they've been doing for a long time, anyways.
All
And it's to their
three
own,
sides, actually.
yeah, all three sides. Yeah,
Russia as well.
and let's be honest, it's to their benefit, and it's given them an outsized influence in the region. I mean, yeah, I know their military is relatively strong, but I think that the geopolitical position they're in has really maximized their position in a way that, you know, they're very fortunate to have. Let's put it that way. And you know, Turkey's problems primarily are domestic. If they can ever get if they can just get their currency to just relax, I mean, my goodness, it's just like I'm going to Turkey in about a month, and it's over 50 lira now to €1. And when I was there in June, it was like 45. I mean, every 2 months it's going up, and like this hyperinflation it's killing the economy. So if they can get that reeled in somehow, yeah, I think Turkey will be fine. But you know, these economic issues domestically are real, and they need to be solved. But anyways, for the overall picture in Europe, you know, I think that, you know, more of the same. I think again, slow change, and I don't see anything too dramatic happening in Europe. You know, Trump's idea of pulling apart. I was reading about the strategy to pull Poland, Austria, Italy, and somewhat Hungary out of the EU and into some America alliance. That's never going to happen. I don't even think Orban's stupid enough to fall for that kind of nonsense. You know, Orban knows damn well that Trump's, you know, he'll be lucky if he finishes these next 3 years, and then after that, that little alliance is going to be history. Because someone like J.D. Vance would have no interest in maintaining such a thing. So, yeah, you know, again, I think this sort of shows the Trump's animosity towards Europe. Why is he so angry at Europe? Because he realized it is a challenge for him. You know what I mean? He can't control it. And it's something it's a thorn in his side. And I think that's why he so frequently lashes out at the EU, because he can't fully figure it out. And he can't fully bring it under his heel like he would like to. So that's sort of my take on that.
To wrap up, I just want to notice that although the new security strategy that the US unrolled claims that it wants to cool down on China, and although in the current friction between China and Japan, the US is being quiet, which is unusual, I don't buy this business that the US is taking its eye off the ball and is not interested in antagonizing China or containing China. This remains to be seen. So this is something to watch out in the new year, whether the US really doesn't want to go into active containment of China, or it's going to be doing that. But right now it's saying it isn't. It's pedaling back, but we'll see. I'm not sure about that.
All right, I think we got it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.